Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video of JWT Part 2 session, we will generate the token by comparing the username and password which is there in the database with the username and password that we are sending in the request by entering the login credentials. Here, I'm having the JWT project, JWT full application project. I have added the corresponding dependencies, JPA dependency, web dependency, JWT, Java, JSON Web Token dependency, JAX-B dependency, DevTools, connector, MySQL connector, Lambda, all these dependencies. Let me start building the application. Let me configure the application.properties. Spring dot data source dot driver class name. This is the driver class name from.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. Let me configure the URL spring dot data source dot URL JDBC colon MySQL colon / localhost colon 3306 / my database name is soup spring dot data source dot username. Username is my database. Username is root. Spring dot data source dot password. My password is root mgreta123. Spring dot jpa dot show underscore SQL. I'm setting this as true so that at the runtime we can see the background running queries. Spring dot jpa dot hibernate ddl auto. Initially I'm setting this as create spring dot database platform jpa dot hibernate dot jpa dot database platform org dot hibernate dot dialect dot -8 dialect. Thus we have configured the application.properties. Let me create the entity class. New class. Keep that in the entity package. Entity. Use class name as user. Take the attributes private integer id private string name private string username private string password private set of strings roles Control Shift Enter at the rate of column, name this as role, mark this class as at the rate of entity, at the rate of data, at the rate of table name as user data. Control Shift O to organize the imports at the rate of mark this class as element collection. This at the rate of element collection is used to get the column details of another table to this table. Here we are having the user table and the roles table. We have two tables now. This at the rate of element collection is used to get the column details, corresponding column details of another table to this table. At the rate of fetch, I am fetching fetch type dot even at the rate of collection table. This collection table is used to map the corresponding table to this table by using the column ID primary key. It will fetch the details from one table to another table by using the primary key. Name equal to row its data. This collection table. When we point it here, specify the table that is used for mapping the collection of basics of embeddable types. That means, for example, we have user data and the roles. Here, the user data table and the roles data table. We have two tables now. It is used to map the data from one table. For example, in the roles data table, if you want to map the details of another table by using the ID of another table. That means by using the foreign key of another table, it will fetch the details from that table and it will get the data. Roles table. Map the join column, comma, join columns, at the rate of join column, name equal to ID. Control Shift comma, name equal to ID. After we have done with building the user entity class. Interface. Create the repository. Repos. JWT. User repository. Extend it from the JPA repository. Here, write the class. Take the type. Primary key type. Control Shift comma. Control organize the control cell. In the user class, when we have forgotten to map it at the rate of ID, at the rate of generated value. Control save. Let me create the service class. Keep that in the service package. JWT service, user service. We can finish. Let's take the integer save user. Take the user entity. This is interface. Organize the inputs control save. New class user service IMPL. Implement the user service interface. Inject the repository. Private user repository repos and push at the rate of auto delete the tools repos dot say user, enter the incoming user dot get id, that will return the integer. Create the controller class, keep that in the controller package. User controller, annotate this with at the rate of first controller. Private, inject the service user service at the rate of authorize this. Write the method public response entity which takes the string type save user details. Write the entity user by using the service reference variable service dot call the method which is there in the service which is save user and pass the user. Annotate here at the rate of request body. This request body annotation, when we are entering the user details from the post map, we will enter there in the JSON format. The JSON format initially it will convert into the Java object and it will be saved into the database. For that we will use the request body annotation. Assign statement to new local variable. Assign statement to new local variable. Return the response entity back. Return new response entity which is taking a string. ID save comma HTTP start. So that okay. Annotate map this with post mapping slash save this with request mapping slash API. Okay. Control shift go to organize the imports. Control save. Let me check once user service and call. Another this here with the service which service which is a zero data annotation. everything was given. Workbench. Good. At the rate of 1, 2, 3. Fine. New pointer. Create database JWT project. One row affected database has been created. Okay. Come here. In the application dot properties, mark this as JWT project. Control save. Let me insert the user details first into the database. Run it. Minus Spring Boot. Remind me later. User. Okay. What's data? Application of properties. Okay. Okay. Open the post one. Slash. Open the controller. Where is the controller slash API slash save slash API slash save. Here already I'm having some data, name, username, password. Something Krish. Insert trigger. Click send. User 1 has been saved. Okay. Now implement the JWT. JWT. Now we will create the token. New class. Keep that in the util package. Util JWT util. Annotate this class with the rate of component. Take one attribute, private string secret. Save the key as a secret at the rate of app dot secret and dot secret. Open the application of properties and secret equal to Anish. After this, let me build the token. Public string generate token, which takes the subject. Return JWTs dot builder, which builds the token dot set the subject dot set issuer javaeplanet by javaeplanet dot set issued at new date system dot current time in milliseconds dot set expiration new date current time. Sorry. System dot current time in milliseconds. Change this into millis plus by using the time units, which is from the concurrent class dot minutes dot 2 millis. And you initially as 15 minutes dot sign in with signature algorithm dot HS256. Take the secret key secret dot get bytes. To change entire thing into string by calling the concat. Sorry. Concat. Yes. After this, let me create the get clients method to get the complete details from the user details from the token. Public clients get clients, which takes the string token. Control Shift O to organize the inputs. Return JWTs dot parse. Parse method is used to read dot set signing with secret dot get bytes dot parse clients JWS, which takes the token dot get body. Control Shift format. After this, get the user details. Public string get username, which takes the string token. Return get clients, pass the token dot get subject, which gives the username. public. Now get the expiration date exp date, which takes the token. Return, call the getClients method so that we will get the entire data, token data dot get expiration, that will get the expiration date. After this, after getting the expiration date, we will check the token whether token is expired or not by calling the before method. Public that returns the boolean value, boolean is token expired. String token. Return, call the getClients method and pass the token dot get the token expiration date. Get expiration. Sorry. Get exp date, pass the token first to check whether the token is expired or not. Call the expiration date. Assign statement to any local variable by using that reference variable expiration dot before new. This before method will check whether the token is present or it is expired before it came to in use. New date system news. Okay. After this, finally check whether the token is validate or not by returning whether it is true or false. Boolean validate the token by passing the string token comma string username, which is coming from the DVD. To validate that, first of all we should get the username from the token. To get the username from the token, call the get username and call the token. We will get the user details from the token. Assign statement to new local variable. This is token username. Token username. Return expiration date. So pass the token username dot equals and pass the username which is coming from the DB. Token username. Username dot equals to token name, and also token doesn't expire. Pass the token. Okay. boolean value token. Control shift one. We have validated the token. After this, after writing the util class, let me generate the token first. For that, write to entities class user request and user response. User request at the rate of data. User request. Mistake private string username private string password. Control shift format and control C. Take the user new class user response. This user response will return the token private string token and the private string message. Control shift format at the rate of data at the rate of no constructor at the rate of constructor that will generate the token without any problem and the message also. After this, in the controller section, create one login method which returns the public response entity user response which returns the user response login user that takes the user request that takes the user request at the rate of request to body. After this, inject the util class first at the rate of part over private JWT format. So after this util dot generate token. I'm calling the generate token method here. This method I'm calling. This generate token method I'm calling. And pass the subject. That means request dot get username. Send statement to new local variable token. That will use the token. Internally, username means subject. That's what I'm telling request dot get subject, which is coming from the database. Util dot generate token return response entity user response. We will write it directly. Dot okay. User response response should be token, comma, success generated by Javaeplanet. This message, when we enter the username and password, this message will be with the token. This message will be generated as a response. Okay. At the rate of post mapping slash login. So something else. Okay. Okay. Let me generate the dummy token first. After that, we will authenticate the token. If the authenticated details are set to be true, the authentication is successful, then we will generate the token. We will validate the user which is there in the database, user credentials which is there in the database with the credentials that we are producing, that we are entering, and we will validate it, we will authenticate it. If the authentication is set to be true, then we will generate the token in the next session. First of all, we will generate the dummy token. Here slash login. I'm entering the username, password. We can enter anything because we are not authenticating now. We will enter the username and password details. Post, sorry, it is API. Something syntax. Undeserved comparison problem set to become. Okay. Okay. Something username Krishna. Yes. We have generated the token and the message is successfully generated by Javaeplanet. That means what we have done is we have created the JWT util. Here, JWT util, we have generated the token and we have called the generate token method here by passing the username, that is subject, and we are returning the response, that is user response as a token. We have requested with the user credentials and we have generated the token, and in turn it is sending the response which is token and the success message. Now we will authenticate the, here this is the token and this is the message. Okay, fine. Now we'll authenticate. Create the config class, new class, keep that in the config pattern. Config. This configuration at the rate of enable web. Sorry. First we have to enable the context. activate the dependency, security dependency composing. Yes, it is done. Okay. At the rate of enable web security. After this, extend this web config classic web security configuration adapter. It is like a plugin HTTP. Sorry, configure HTTP method override this and after this create the bean public encode return new decrypt password encoder and instantiate this at the rate of b at the rate of b at the rate of b from b. Now in the service in the service class inject this decrypt password encoder. Sorry, private encoder authorize this encode the password. User dot set password encoder dot encode user dot get password. That means we are getting the password from the database and we are encoding it, and after encoding of the password we are setting into the database. Yes. Completed. After this class user details service IMPR implements user details service implemented methods annotate this class at the rate of service. In the repository return the user find by name. Sorry. Find by user string user. This is the custom finder method which returns the username details, which returns the user details. Inject this repository here. Sorry, not here. The user details. Private user. Sorry. User repository repos at the rate of authorize records dot find by username. Pass the username. This returns the user. Write the condition here. If user double equal to null, throw new username not found. User doesn't exist with the username. That's all. Okay. The username and return the user details. New user. This is not the entity class. This is the user from the Spring Security. Spring Security. By using this reference variable user dot get username, comma user dot get password, comma user dot get roles. We will dot here we should provide the granted authority. That means the authorities, the roles. We should provide the granted authority. That means write permission, read permission. We should grant those authorities for the each role. For that we will iterate each role and we will grant the authorities to dot string dot map role, map the each role and write the new simple granted authority and pass the role. And pass the role dot collect collectors dot to list control shift format. Save. After this user details service, we will try to authenticate the user. In the config class, http dot csrf dot disable the csrf authorize the request dot and matches, provide the URLs patterns there. Element slash API slash API slash login slash API save, /API /login dot any request permit these patterns permit out dot any request dot authenticate, and also dot session management dot session creation policy session creation policy which is invented dot is stateless. It is stateless. JWT is not a stateful authentication. It is a stateless. That's a control shift format. Now authenticate the user details here by injecting the config authentication. Override the authentication manager and inject it at the end of the. After this, control save, come to user details, authenticate it. Inject the authentication. Private authentication manager authentication manager. Auto after authentication manager dot authenticate and pass the new username password authentication token and pass the request dot get username get password or the username and password. Okay, control shift format. Now let me authenticate the incoming user details. New class sometimes known as India.
Yes, application is working. Here name Ram, username I am taking as Ramarao, password as Ram. I am inserting the data first. Post. User 2 has been saved. The username and the password details and this username and password Ramarao and Ram, which has been saved in the database. Exactly now when we are logging in, the username and password should match with the that we are giving should match with the username and password which is there in the database. Ramarao and Ram, password is Ram. Then only token will be generated. Here it is. Token message success granted by JWT. For example, here Ramarao Ram. If I enter the wrong password or username, for example like this, it will send the 403 forbidden. That means we cannot, authentication is set to be false and the credentials are authenticated and it has written the false and it is showing the 403 forbidden. That's all. If I enter the correct details Ram, it will give the exact token and the message. That's all. We have authenticated the user details. After this, when we are sending the second request to the server, compulsory the token should be authenticated and it should be passed from the filter. It should pass from the filter. For example, while sending the second request and validating the token by using once per request, we should use once per request filter to pass within the filter and it should register in the web config. It should register here in the web configuration. Now in the second step, what we are doing is we will get the authorization header and check that token is not null and get the username from the token and check the username is not null and security context authentication should be empty. It should be initially it should be empty because at first time we are not logging in now, so that it should be empty and initially context should be null and user doesn't log in because it is null. Initially we didn't log it in now, so it is set to be null and we will validate the token and map the user authentication request details and set the authentication object. Now we will write the filter once per request filter and pass the details from it. Class security filter, the security filter annotate this class with @ component extends once per request filter. What is this once per request filter? To understand the role of once per request filter, we need to first clearly understand how a normal filter behaves. When we want to execute some code, some specific code before or after servlet execution, we will create a filter. Before and after execution, we will create a filter. So, for example, if you have two types of codes, code 1 executes before servlet and code 2 executes after servlet. But here, while servlet execution, there can be some other request to a different servlet. There can be some other request to a different servlet, and that different servlet is also having the same filter. For every request, there will be a different type of servlets. For all the servlets, we have only one filter, and that filter will be executed for every servlet and every request. So in order to avoid that, we will use the once per request filter. This once per request filter will be used to execute only once. Execute only one. This security context do filter internal. If we will override the do filter internal. First of all, first thing what we will do is we will get the authorization header by using the request dot get header. Authorization header from the token. This returns a token. After that, we will check, next step is we will check whether the token is null or it is present or not by writing the if condition. If token not null, token is not null. If token is not null, from the util class, inject the util class private JWT util authorize this util dot get username, pass the token. This gets the subject. If the token is not null, that means if the token is not null, we will get the username from the token. Assign statement to new local variable, we get the username from the token. If username not equal to null, if the username is not null, and security context holder dot get context dot get authentication is equal to null. If this is null, authentication object is null, that means we didn't log in at the first stage. Null. Then load the user from the database. Service, inject the user detail service here. Private user detail service, auto wire this service dot load user by username, if the security context holder dot get context dot get authentication, that means we are getting the authentication object, that means we is equal to null. Authentication object is null means we didn't log it in, there is no user in the authentication object. If it is null and the username is not null, then get the username from the database. User and validate the token. Util dot validate the token, pass the token and pass the username which is coming from the database. Username dot get username. This returns the boolean value. That means we are checking whether the token is valid or not, whether it is present or not. That's all. Boolean is valid. If this is valid, if the token is valid, if it is valid, authenticate it. Username, password, authentication, token equal to new username, password, authentication, token and pass the principal means user. Token, username, password, authentication, token. User dot user dot get password comma user dot get authorities. We are authenticating the token. After authenticating the token, by using the reference variable token dot set details new web authentication, details. That means we are tracking the authentication details of the incoming user. Authentication details new web authentication details source dot build the details. we are building the details. That means this web authentication details source implementation of authentication details source, which builds the details of object from an request. That means when we are logging in, we are giving the credentials. That credentials we are giving the credentials. That credentials are built into an object which builds the details object. That builds the object we are requesting for the authentication. Then the details will be built as an object. For that we are using the web authentication detail source dot built, and we will set the authentication object. Security context holder dot get context dot set authentication and pass the token, auth token. By using this filter chain, do filter, call the do filter request and response. This do filter method, which is used for the chain the request for the another entity. That means for every entity, for every request, this do filter method will work, and it will dispatch the request and response for every chain of filter, for every request. Control save. After this, register in the web config. Register in the web config. Dot let me inject the filter first. Security filter. Keep this in the filter package. Yes. Control Shift O to organize the imports. After this, web config, private security filter at the rate of auto via control shift. As the imports, add filter, dot and dot add filter before and pass the filter username password authentication, username password filter dot class, control shift format and control save. Yes. Now create one method here, and then in the which is user controller. Public return the response entity, and pass the string access data. Pass the principal is the username. Return the response entity dot OK. Hello user plus dot get the name. Internally, after authentication, if the authentication is successful and the authorization, when we pass the authorization header and everything has been successful, then the filter will register into the web security configure adapter class. In that web security configure adapter class, we have the authentication complete details. In that authentication, we have the principal. Internally, principal is a username. If everything is successful, it will return the user details, otherwise it will authentication is set to as fail. Post mapping, slash markup format, save. Yes, everything is successful. From the first we will generate something. Venkat, name as Venkatrao, password as VEN. Save the details. User 3 has been saved. By using this username and password, we will generate the token Venkat when. When click on send, yes. Now copy the token, authorization header, authorization, paste the token here. This is the key authorization that we are passing internally. Security filter, this is the header we are passing authorization. Click, this is user API. Hello. hello user Venkat. Everything is successful, and this is all about the complete implementation of JWT.